You're watching Reason and Theology Live. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
And welcome back to Reason and Theology. We're doing our third show for the day here. We did one earlier with Bishop Strickland, just had one right now that we just finished up on vaccine ethics. And here we are for our third show for the day, wrapping it up with the series on Our Lady of Fatima webinar with Kevin Symonds. Kevin, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm okay. Just been an interesting day. How about you?
Pretty interesting myself. It's been a busy one. So, yeah, like I said, we just finished a show and hopped off that stream and joined this one. So here we are.
All right.
Well, tell us a little bit about the video that we're about to watch here in just a moment.
All right. Well, this is the sixth and last of the Fatima webinar series. And I was debating whether or not I should just do this one from the hip or if I should do what I've kind of been doing so far with the videos and stuff. And ultimately, I decided to go with the video. We've been talking so far about the nature of heresy and apostasy with respect to the events of the 1960s and 70s. And we conclude our discussion here with in this webinar overall with a note of hope about what we've been talking about with respect to the Passion of the Church. It's going to be a bit of an interesting spiritual interpretation. So I hope people have got their spiritual theology antennae going on here. And I'm hoping we're going to have some good discussion because we had Father Murr on. You had Father Murr on a few months ago. And I just finished proofreading his book, his new book that's coming out. And it's going to be so good. So I've got a lot of thoughts running through my head here. So we'll see how this goes. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. What's the topic of the book, if you don't mind me asking, if you can say?
The Apostolic Visitation of the Roman Curia with Edward Cardinal Len Archbishop Gagnon, and more about the liturgical issues and Freemasonry and stuff like that. It's going to be really, really good. I mean, I was enthralled reading this. It was just so good.
They're now starting to come up with an imposter theory for you, Kevin. They're saying there's another second Kevin, kind of like there's an imposter sister, Lucia, because you're not wearing a turtleneck. So
yeah, I wanted to change it up a little bit tonight. So
yeah. All right, let me.
I can go get it.
No, you're good. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll watch the video. All right. Please let me know if y'all have any difficulty with the audio, by the way. It should be working. Okay. All right. 3, 2, 1. Oh, wait. I don't know why it does that. It just automatically mutes these videos for some reason. Let's start it over. 3, 2, 1.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Webinar 6 and final installment of our series on Fatima and reinterpreting the third part of The Secret. Having discussed the nature of heresy and apostasy within the events of the 1960s and 70s, in this webinar we conclude our discussion with a note of hope about the Passion of the Church. A Passion of the Church was foreseen many decades ago. Archbishop Fulton Sheen, in his book Communism and the Conscience of the West, that we saw mentioned in a previous webinar, spoke of the Church experiencing a resurrection through a passion. Writing after the end of World War II, Sheen encouraged people to consider that the Church has often been killed, owing to some heresy or error. And just when things seemed bleak, he wrote that, quote, "It was the Church that finally buried the age," end quote. He wrote further, quote, "The Church is now supposed to be buried in the days of our contemporary anti-religious revolutions, but the fact is that it is just being sepulchered in the bowels of the earth, where it is digging catacombs, and whence one day it will emerge to reconquer the earth. If at this moment we are going into the catacombs, it is only as Christ went into the grave. The world might just as well expect to see him there permanently interred as they might look for the freezing of a star, for heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. End quote. Though Sheen was writing about events post-World War II, his general point of the Church dying and rising again is applicable here. In the end, the Church triumphs over her enemies. The task before Catholics is to pray, do penance, and amend our lives as Our Lady asked us to do. There is much work of re-evangelization before us, the foundation of which is prayer, penance, and sacrifice. We see a perfect example of how to live Our Lady's message in the person of Sister Lucia. In the first webinar, I brought attention to the matter of Our Lady commanding Sister Lucia not to reveal the meaning of the third part of the secret. This matter is most curious for many people because it evokes the question, why would Our Lady come down from heaven in order to give a message, but then command that a part of it not be revealed? It is a good question, truly, and one that requires an answer. I would like to build upon various components from our prior webinars to reflect upon some matters that may help us to understand better Our Lady's command. There have been many speculations about the third part of the Secret of Fatima. Unfortunately, these speculations have, in a notable way, clouded our understanding of the vision. It is far less sensational than people thought it would be. There was no prediction of the end of the world or some other such thing. Rather, it was about people remaining faithful to the gospel of Jesus Christ in the midst of terrible persecution. Christians have faced martyrdom in some form since the inception of Christianity. The third part of the secret, however, is about the specific dangers faced by the Church through the spread of the errors of Russia. We saw earlier that Pius XII seemed to possess a very keen, dare I say prophetic, insight into these dangers and the response of God-fearing Christians to them. That response was about making reparation and expiation to God for the sins committed against him. Let us go back then to something Our Lady said to the three little shepherds on May 13, 1917. She posed this question to them, quote, "Do you wish to offer yourselves to God to endure all the sufferings that he may be pleased to send you as an act of reparation for the sins by which he is offended and to ask for the conversion of sinners?" End quote. They willingly accepted, and Our Lady told them that they would have much to suffer. Certainly, Francisco and Jacinta Marto suffered tremendously before their deaths in 1919 and 1920, respectively. There is, though, a special focus upon Sister Lucia in this regard. She lived to a very old age, just shy of 98. Living so long meant more opportunity, both to suffer for God and thereby make reparation or expiation, as well as to spread the gospel. It is, in short, the famous Pauline dilemma, quote, "For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain," end quote. Moreover, Sister Lucia saw what was predicted to her come to pass. Witnessing such things come to pass is a suffering in and of itself, the horrors of the events themselves being, of course, a suffering all their own. Lucia suffered so much, as we saw earlier, because of the diabolical disorientation, as she called it, that Our Lady took pity upon her and appeared to Lucia again in the late 1970s, in order to strengthen her. For one who has seen heavenly things, being on earth is a silent martyrdom. The third part of the Secret of Fatima is about the martyrdom and/or sufferings of people who remain faithful to Jesus Christ throughout this diabolical disorientation. In that light, then, we can easily see Sister Lucia's own place within this vision. She did not die by a red martyrdom, but she most certainly died after suffering a long, tremendous, and, if I may say, unique, white martyrdom. Seen in this way, the third part of the secret is rather sensational, but on its own terms. For it is not so much about the prediction of future events. Rather, it was related more to powerful spiritual realities that are often underestimated in the world today. This underestimation should come as no surprise. They come at a time when errors such as atheism and materialism have so darkened the minds of men that they are titillated more by the world and its vanities than by the things of the spirit. I think that it is possible to offer a theory regarding Our Lady's command to observe silence on the meaning of the third part of the Secret of Fatima. I posit that the third part was not necessarily meant for public consumption, at least entirely. It treated some deep and powerful mystical realities of the spiritual life. The grace to know such profound mysteries through the unique historical circumstances to come was afforded to the three little shepherds as they were called by God to partake in these realities. Therefore, the third part was meant for the three visionaries, of which Lucia, who lived an additional 80+ years beyond her sainted cousins, has a certain pride of place, and to assist their interior lives. This assistance was especially in regards to their desire to offer themselves to God in expiation and reparation for the sins of others. Maintaining silence, then, on the meaning of the vision has the twofold effect of protecting profound and sacred mysteries while compelling faithful Christians to discover anew those realities in their own interior lives. Now, at long last, I'd like to bring this all to a conclusion. Sister Lucia's prophetic insights into events offer us an important hermeneutical key to understanding an important aspect of the message of Our Lady at Fatima. That aspect is Our Lady's warning about what would happen if Russia spread her errors, atheism and materialism specifically. This is a thorny topic for discussion, but necessary, and to the extent possible, it must be free from polemics. It must also possess all due submission to the authority of the Church. Unfounded notions, for example, that some hidden text pertaining to the third part of the secret condemns Vatican II, must be absolutely dismissed. The overall secret of Fatima is a profound revelation and must be carefully studied both with respect to its hermeneutical key of faith as well as its organic unity. There are, as we have seen, multiple levels of convergence to various historical events with respect to the third part of the secret of Fatima. We must read the text within an ecclesiastical context and not outside of it. In the meantime, the secret continues to challenge us, but this challenge strikes me as being part of the grace afforded by heaven in the midst of the passion of the Church. We must be like Our Lady and give our own fiat, as well as ponder these things in our hearts. In so doing, we maintain or we develop a Marian attitude of being receptive to God's grace and walking the path of her Immaculate Heart, which, as she said at Fatima, will be the pathway that leads us to God. Let us then imitate Our Lady's example and be open to God and His grace. I'd like to thank you all for joining me and Mr. Lofton during this webinar series. I guess for the last time, from here, I'd like to open up the floor for any questions that you may have. And again, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure serving you. So this works. Try this. See what happens here. Archbishop Fulton Sheen, in his book *Communism and the Conscience of the West*, mentioned in a Archbishop Fulton Sheen, in his book *Communism and the Conscience of the West*, mentioned that a passion of the Church was foreseen a passion. I offer your holiness my daily prayers and sufferings, the insignificant but sincere offering of. The second part shows the earthly consequences, i.e., if man does not cease to offend God, while at the same where there is martyrdom. The second is that a man These manifestations are 1. Rejecting altogether. Do that better. Quote, the generous victims who during the images, therefore, such communism some new documentation written by Sister Lucia here offers us some excellent reflections. In a private note revealed by the Carmelites of Coimbra in their 2013 biography, the revelation of Fatima is a reminder that we live in a moral universe, that evil is its... I know that your heart suffers much these days on account of the happenings in the Church, for peace in the world. Then came the 6 years of World War II, which, by throwing groups of Catholics and Protestants together in Germany against Hitler, and groups of Catholics and Communists together in France against the Vichy regime and German occupying army, stimulated interest in Christian reunion, that additional to the horizontal plane of life, there is also the vertical, which leads to God.
I loved the blooper, the blooper reel.
Yeah,
hold on.
I was trying to figure that out. I was like, okay, I've made blooper reels before, but you have to get the right music to accompany it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I was going through YouTube trying to find stuff, and I found that, and I was like, oh, this would work.
I think it went really well. That was hilarious. That's the first time we've done a blooper reel. That's great.
Yeah, I just thought it'd be kind of nice. We've just gone through a marathon of 6 things on Fatima and some pretty heady stuff, and untwisting a lot. So I figured, all right, let's have some levity here, and just kind of. I deleted the first 2 stuff, but all of those came from, I think, webinars 3, 4, 5, and 6, I think. But yeah, the first 2 probably would have had an awful lot more.
That's awesome. I enjoyed that. Like you said, we need some levity. In fact, I probably need to do a behind the scenes sometime of R&D too, and show you some of the bloopers that go on here. Let's see.
I think it's really fun because it's like people just, it's more relatable. People kind of get into that better. So
absolutely. Y'all go ahead and send your questions for Kevin. Make sure to send them to At Reason in Theology. Philip says blooper reels need to become a thing from this moment on. I agree. I think we need to do that. So I think we can make that happen.
Jonathan Soko says, someone that doesn't like Kevin's totally going to clip these. I know. Honestly, Jonathan, I was thinking much the same thing. I said, I am giving everybody cannon fodder to go after me. But I decided, okay, we talk about vulnerability, right? I figured, all right, I'll be vulnerable this once and just kind of put it out there. And, if somebody decides to abuse it in a way that it wasn't meant to be, well, I hope they remember that there is the judgment, and particular as well as general. And, they will answer to God for it.
Right. Yeah, there seems to be no end to the things that people will do these days with people they don't agree with when it comes to theology. People who identify as Christians, that's what's really confusing to me. So I understand people who are secular, who aren't Christian. I understand why they behave the way they do. I don't understand it from Christians.
Yeah, I mean, it's all part of that diabolical disorientation that Sister Lucia talked about. It's really sad, but this is part of like what it is. We just had that recently. For instance, the Facebook whistleblower, I forget her, I can't remember, Frances Hagen. I can't remember her name, but when she went on record and stated something to the effect of how it's Facebook depends upon anger in some ways to get that it's a fast, quick response. Yeah, it's actually true. It's self-evidently true. That's how a lot of these things operate in social media. You have to play to someone's passions. If you want them to buy something, you have to make them think that they need it, or make you look cool, or whatever the case may be. And in the case of clicks and clickbaiting, anger is one of the fastest ways to do this. So you send out these little things that kind of get people's attention, and they just respond. And so it takes a lot of self-control to really rein that in. But in order to do that, you need to practice virtue. I know of a homeschooling family in Wisconsin. One of them was studying to be a priest, and then he left. And I think one of the other boys in the family is now going into the seminary, if I remember correctly. But their parents didn't even allow them to have Facebook when they were growing up, in their teenage years. And I kind of thought, and I've reflected upon this. And this was like 10 years ago now that I learned about this. And I just remember thinking that was like a hallmark in my life, seeing that and hearing that from them, and then meeting the parents and seeing how good actually and wholesome the parents actually are. But it's about training their children in virtue, and they're pretty upstanding people now, and they don't have all of that addiction and whatever else. But yeah, I mean, there's almost always something that kind of ties into Fatima with respect to the contemporary errors and everything going on nowadays. People just have to follow these threads. Our Lady gave kind of a broad outline, but the heart of it all is right there. And it's amazing when you study it and you see how it affects so much. It's mind-boggling.
I don't see any chat questions yet, so y'all go ahead and send them. Is there? I want to say there is a documentary on Fatima on YouTube, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it. Is it The Secret Still Hidden? Have you seen that?
Well, there's a whole book about that.
Well, I know there's the book, but I think it's the video too. Yeah, The Secret Still Silenced, or no? Yeah.
Yeah, there is a book. There's a movie or a documentary. I think it's at least an hour long.
Yeah.
I think that was published by Father Gruner in the Fatima Center.
Right. The Secret Still Silenced. What is your view of that documentary?
I'm familiar with their overall arguments. I actually haven't watched the documentary itself, but the nature, if you look back on what Pope Pius XI talked about in his encyclical Vigilanti Cura, he talked about how the cinema works. It's actually a document on the cinema, like movies. And he talks about it from a very, very Catholic, moral, theological, as well as philosophical perspective. But the way that these videos are designed to do these things is like they add the charm of music, as Pius XI called it. And they engage much more the passive intellect. River is in the chat room. I'm sure he's going just salivating all over this right now. But they in other words, you passively get things, but you're not really engaging the mind, really and truly. If anything, you're engaging the passions, like what we were just talking about a few moments ago. And so, being familiar with the Fatima Center's arguments, with this whole fourth secret conspiracy nonsense, and it is nonsense. As I think I referred to it before, I like to call it as a sideshow freak show, because and demonic as well, because it's the arguments themselves. They were based upon at the time some glaring things that were some glaring, not omissions, but glaring problems, I guess you can say. And people will harp on these matters. So, for instance, when in the book, The Message of Fatima, that was published by the Holy See in the year 2000 with the text of the third part, when Umbrtone, then Archbishop, later Cardinal Umbrtone, is talking about how there was a, page 16, there was a fourth memoir wherein Sister Lucia adds, in Portugal, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved, etc. Umbrtone relegates that to a footnote, whereas Father Gruner and Christopher Ferrara and others, Andrew Cezanek, I think was another one, they were all saying, wait a minute, this is a more complete text. Why are you relegating that sentence to a footnote? It's actually in the fourth memoir, which rounds out the narrative. Why are you relegating that to a footnote? Well, that's a good question. As I said all along, Father Gruner didn't always ask good questions, but some places he did, and this was one of them. So little inconsistencies like this, people then kind of pounce on, and then they create this whole elaborate narrative, and you just sit in and you're scratching your head like, where are you getting this from? But you have to kind of weigh it very, very carefully. But because things were allowed to fester for so many years, it doesn't really, error was allowed to spread. Errors were allowed to spread. And a whole worldview or interpretation had been created. And until my book came along on the third part of The Secret of Fatima, no one actually really truly looked at this literature and critiqued it. No one really did. My book is pretty much the first one of its kind. Cardinal Umbrtone did his job in his book L'ultima Veggente di Fatima, The Last Visionary of Fatima, but it wasn't really a scholarly perspective. It wasn't an in-depth thing. Granted, it was authoritative because he was intimately involved with Fatima from the year 1999, give or take, to about the year 2005, 2006 or so. And so he was very much involved. So there's authority backing what he says, but no real specific scholarly refutation that says, well, yeah, if you look on this page of their book, they quote this guy. Like, none of that kind of stuff. So it's very, very unfortunate. But really, at the end of the day, documentaries like The Secret's Still Hidden, the book with Secret Still Silence, I'm familiar with the arguments, not having watched this particular documentary, but I'm familiar because it only can emanate from the stuff that they've been putting out in print and other videos and lectures. A lot of them are tired, old, dead horses, and they just continue to beat it to death. They continue to beat it to death. And none of them have really done anything with my book. The only one who really tried to do something was that gentleman at Catholic, Matt Gaspers from Catholic Family News. He was supposed to write a series of 3 articles that was in response to my book. Unfortunately, he didn't feel as though he could complete it because at the time I was in seminary and he was starting to publish these, but I was not allowed to publish anything per rules that were established by my diocese. And so I contacted him and I sent via email, and I said, you're free to respond, of course, but I just want you to know I can't say anything publicly. I may say something privately when you're done, but and he was gracious enough to say, okay, well, I won't write the third one then. And I'm like, or publish at least the third one. So that was gentlemanly of him. I appreciated that act of kindness and charity. That was decent, of course. Unfortunately, with the 2 articles that were published, he didn't really do a good job. There were logical fallacies there, like guilt by association was one of them. Like, for instance, I'm friends with some of the people at the World Apostolate of Fatima, the Blue Army, here in the United States. And I had mentioned that fact right in the beginning of my book. And all of a sudden, they turned that into like I was the spawn of Satan somehow, or at least Matt Gaspers did. And I sat there and I read this and I was just like, where do you people come up with this stuff? Is this your best argument against the book? The fact that I know Deacon Bob Ellis, a deacon, a cleric of the Holy Roman Catholic Church, I mean, come on, really? It's not like this guy is doing horrible things that I won't say on camera, I just, unlike other stuff we hear in the news, right? But I'm sitting there, I'm just like, this is just awful. This is awful. There's no real argument to be had. The only one that ever really pointed out something that was really truly of note was when Christopher Ferrara had pointed out that I had mistranslated something. Fine, that's fair. Thankfully, it was a minor point. It wasn't a major thing. But still, I was like, oh, and no sooner was it out there, I had something out there, I think within 24, 36 hours on my website talking about it, openly admitting, yeah, that was a mistake on my part. Fine. We move on, right? Somebody else whom you've had on your show, actually, he wrote an entire review of the book. And he said the major flaw of the book was that it didn't talk about the consecration of Russia. And he proceeds to just go off on my book, but saying this right from the get-go. And I'm like, that's not the focus of this book. The title is on the third part of The Secret of Fatima. I'm not going into the questions of the consecration of Russia or the consecration of the world. That's not the focus of this book. I just shook my head. I shook my head and I'm like, is anybody going to really engage this, or are they just really going to, dance around it, make it look good for their audiences? Because that's what a lot of this is. It's just playing to the audience. And it's extremely unfortunate. And I'm not trying to sit here from a position of pride or ugliness or anything, but these are facts. You can go online, you can look them up. They're out there, and just one last thing, for instance, in the beginning of the intro, I think, or the preface to my book there, I was just talking about how I showed respect for people with whom I disagree with. And somehow Matt Gaspers twisted that around in his review to paint me ugly. And I'm like, how do you get from a text that expressly states, that respect or shows some charity and respect to these people with whom I may disagree in some areas, how do you twist that to make it ugly? There's only one entity that I know of that does that, and I do believe he's called the devil or Satan, So I'm sorry, but this is just the honest way of it. It's the honest way of it. I get tired of having to put on the most charitable face, because all you do is still greet it with this scorn. It gets tiring after a while. So, sorry if this looks like I'm kind of, punching back a little bit, but it really is. It needs to be said, because these arguments against my book, by and large, some of them treat it like it doesn't even exist. And so, to go back to what we talked, why I brought all this up, they're using old and tired arguments. My book has changed an awful lot, but they've put up a wall, so to speak, because if the contents of this book leaked to a lot of the traditionalist communities and groups, they would start to realize, wait a minute, there's something not quite right here. This goes against the narrative, and this is footnoted out the wazoo. All these sources in 6 different languages, not English, but 6 foreign languages. It's like, wait a minute, we gotta look at this here. Like, it's been a game changer, but people just ignore it, or they little snide remarks, or in some cases they say stuff behind my back. It's unfortunate. It really is. It's extremely unfortunate, because there's so much depth and beauty to the message of Fatima. But when you're stuck in this enclosed little worldview, you're missing out on so much. You're crippled. Let's use the word. You're crippled. And from where I sit in this chair here in my office, my heart bleeds, because it's like you're missing out on so much. You're just missing out on so much. And if you constantly get angry and polemical, you're not developing the attitude of the Immaculate Heart. You're not following the pathway of Our Lady's Immaculate Heart that leads to God, or that will conduct us to God. So who's really following the Fatima message here? People who are trying to go deeper into the message and are expounding upon it with free of polemics and stuff like that, or people that are going using tired old arguments, many of which are now basically just demolished, and go with this crippled attitude. I'm sorry. People have just got to get with the program. The status Questionis has changed. It has changed. One of the biggest ways that happened was in October of 2013, when the Carmelites of Coimbra published the biography of Sister Lucia. Flat out there in chapter 13, they give Our Lady's words from Sister Lucia, admitting that there was some understanding, and again, the Portuguese word is significado, that was given to Sister Lucia on the third part of the secret. Now, in Fatimology, there's a question that me and a friend of mine debate every so often, was that significado part of the revelation, or was it a separate thing? There's some debate about that in Fatimology, but that's a whole other ball of wax. The point being, we know that there was an interpretation, whatever that may be, but we also then know that Our Lady expressly stated, don't write it down. She expressly stated that in January of 1944. But then again, that was another text that people completely twisted, for Christopher Ferrara in particular. I remember in 2014, when this news broke 7 years ago in the English-speaking world about that passage from the biography, he was twisting that to say, see, there is a second text. The fourth secret is true. Chris, the text expressly states, write what they command you, but not that which is given to you to understand of its meaning. When you have finished, put it into an envelope and seal it and write on the outside.
Do they interact with that and respond to that?
No, it just literally went up and over. And I had to point this out to Chris, 5, 6, 7 years ago, something like that. I was just like, hello, do you not read the text? It says, don't write it down.
What did he say to that?
Nothing.
No.
It's public knowledge, what he said public. People can go back and look at, but he didn't really acknowledge it. As a matter of fact, he was so hyped up on a mistranslation, and indeed it was a mistranslation. The World Apostle of Fatima got the English translation rights from the sisters in Coimbra, and just before it went to print, again, I know the good folks at the World Apostle of Fatima USA Inc., and they let me look at the PDF in advance of chapter 13. And I saw that passage and I saw how they translated it. And I said, you have to fix this. You have to fix this, because if you don't, you are going to get hammered. That's not what the Portuguese says. And it was basically too late. They would have had to spend however much money to get it. It had already gone to the printer, the PDF file. And I was like, and you're going to get it. And sure as the rain falls on a rainy day, about 3 months later, I think it was 2-3 months or something like that, a month, within 3 months, they got hammered. And I rose to their defense as somebody who was involved with that. And I said, you've got to take a look at this. Yeah, that was mistranslated, but you are not telling the truth. Ferrara actually characterized it as them having malice, that they were trying to do this deliberately. It was a deliberate mistranslation. He called it Biogate. And I sat there and I was like, how dare you? How dare you? I'm like, that is not what happened at all. So I jumped up and defended the World Apostle to Fatima, and he had to issue I'll call it a tongue-in-cheek apology, but he went down fighting, really. He went down fighting. He was flat out wrong, but he couldn't admit it. He had to save face to his audience, right? Because this is the great Christopher Ferrara, who has, done a lot of good legal work over the years, including recently with the Supreme Court, and won that case recently. So, as I said before, I honor his legal work. He's done some good work. But at the same time, the facts are the facts, and he went down fighting. And it didn't strike me personally as being a genuine apology. And I even told the World Apostle to Fatima, if you really wanted to follow up with that, you could, he's a lawyer, but you could pursue him for that in the courts. Because he made blanket accusation against you, accusing you of having malice with this, and that's simply not the case. And we had emails to prove that this wasn't malicious. But they said to me, no, we don't want to go down that route, Kevin. It's going to do nothing but distract from the message of Our Lady of Fatima if we do that. So here are these people that are being spoken evil against. That it untrue. It's not what they're being accused of was not true. And even though they could have pushed their rights and likely would have won, they said they took the high road and said, no, it's just we're not going to be distracted by that. So who's really following Our Lady of Fatima here? Those who are just pointing the finger and accusing people of malice where it didn't belong, or people who are sitting there saying, whatever, pray the Rosary, 5 First Saturdays. Really, who's really doing this stuff here? I'm sorry. I just, like I said, I have a lot of respect for Ferrara. I really do. But, he really he jumped the gun on that. He jumped the gun. In journalism, it's common courtesy. You at least call up an organization and ask them for comment. Maybe he did that and I don't know, but I didn't hear about it if he did that before he wrote this Biogate controversy stuff in 2015. I'm sorry, but that's just honestly how I feel about everything. It's sad. People have just, it's one thing to have an interpretation, but it's another to sit there and be pertinacious about it and just not really look at the facts overall. I'd say my greatest criticism of Ferrara with Fatima is, as I said publicly before, he approaches it as a lawyer and not as a theologian. And in these webinars, what I've been doing is approaching it from a theological and historical perspective to try to restore some balance to this. It's sad. I don't know what else to say. I should probably just stop talking.
There's a question here. What makes a rosary so special? Honest question, looking for a detailed answer, as opposed to other prayers or devotionals.
There was a book that was published, a history of the of the rosary devotion. It was a pink-colored book and a rosary image on the front, I think, in a picture. I think that book goes into more of the details behind it, but from where I would sit, I would say that purely from a subjective personal standpoint, because it's a meditation upon the mysteries of Christ and of his mother, the Blessed Virgin, and this is a deep part of The spiritual life is constantly having before us our Lord's Passion. That is a tradition going all the way back, centuries, of keeping that ever before us in the spiritual life. And because this is a meditation upon that, and you are approaching it from a Marian perspective, there's at least 53 Hail Marys in one 5-decade rosary, 10 plus the beginning 3 there. You are approaching it from the perspective of Mary to Jesus. And so there's a certain special character that comes with that. Not to mention just all of the graces that are attached to it. And there's a long-standing tradition of various promises of Our Lady to those who pray the Rosary. There used to be these little bookmarks, actually, that were printed several years ago. I have some of them around here in my book somewhere, but that talk about the 15 promises, I think, of Our Lady for those who pray the Rosary. I would also encourage you, I think that was, I'm not sure how to say the name, but St. Louis de Montfort certainly is also going to be one person I would refer you to. The Secret of the Rosary, True Devotion. Those are 2 books that I would recommend off the top of my head. If you want to do a little bit more research, I can only give you my personal perspective on it, which is such as what I've just given. Sister Lucia was convinced that it should be raised to the level of being a liturgical prayer. So it would be Mass, Liturgy of the Hours, Rosary. All 3 be considered liturgical prayers. And she officially petitioned the Holy Father to have that done, actually. So if you go deeper into Fatima studies and her own thinking on that, we might actually have a little bit more of a unique angle to understand that. That's some of the documentation that is, I think, yet to really manifest itself. If her letters are ever published, and there's like 11,000 letters that she wrote over the course of her lifetime, I think we would be in for an awful lot of good stuff. A lot of good stuff. So yeah, somebody just pointed out that the 15 promises are proven forgeries. Okay, I wasn't aware of that, so thank you for bringing that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
One more here from Philip. What are some of the best online resources for information on Fatima and properly understanding the message?
Well, the Sanctuary of Fatima's website. As a matter of fact, they have this whole critical documentation series, Documentação Crítica de Fatima in Portuguese. It's available. This is the selection of documents, so it's kind of like a compendium of all the major important documents. It's available now in Italian, or for Portuguese first, Italian, and now I just found it recently in English. So I was ecstatic to learn that, because I have to look at the Portuguese and try to make sense of things. But now if I have the English, I can just compare a lot easier. So it makes it a little bit better. So there's that one resource. I would also recommend Dr. Christina Sobral's edition of the memoirs, all 6 memoirs of Sister Lucia. This is available only in English, Portuguese. I know of no English translation of it yet, but it has critical notes, footnotes and stuff. But at the end of the book, it also has some appendices that I find to be extremely helpful, like a Q&A between Sister Lucia and I think it was the rector of the Fatima Sanctuary at the time. So this would be one of them. I'd also recommend very strongly the Carmelite's biography of Sister Lucia. This is the Portuguese, Um Caminho sob o Olhar de Maria, A Pathway Under the Gaze of Mary. There is the English version. In the English translation, I'd say is very helpful for devotional stuff. If you want to go deeper into Fatima studies using that book, I would refer you always to the Portuguese text, because quite frankly, because there was that one translation issue some years ago, and because I get involved with languages, I'm automatically inclined to say, I'll just make sure I'll check this against the Portuguese just in case, because I don't know what, if anything, was missed. So I always check it against the Portuguese. And admittedly, I have found mistakes elsewhere in the English translation of the Carmelites' biography. And I don't say that to the detriment of the Blue Army, but it's a fact. There are a number of areas where I myself have found. So if you go back and you look at my writings, you'll see how I've done my own translations. That's why, because I'm aware of that fact of it all, and I wanted to be very, very cautious about it. There's so many good books, but I would say start there. Read the memoirs of Sister Lucia. They used to be downloadable as a PDF. I don't know if they still are. I would steer clear of like the Antonio Sochi stuff, the Christopher, anything really from the Fatima Center on Fatima. I would tell people just steer clear from it. Some of it is good. I admit it. Some of it's good, but it's just got that little twinge, that could really send somebody down the wrong path. So you have to be very, very careful. You have to be very, very careful of that. So, are there any other questions? Or
I don't see any others. Look, I really want to thank you for doing this. This has been a 6-part series, and you've put a lot of time into this. I really appreciate you doing it. As you know, you're always welcome on the show. Anything else you want to come on and talk about, just let me know. I'd love to have you back on.
Well, thank you. Were we going to do the question and the giveaway thing, or?
Yeah, if you want, go ahead.
Okay. Well, the second surprise is we're actually going to have a giveaway, but they're not free. You have to answer questions. For people who have sat and watched all 6 webinars, I have questions for everybody. But first, let me tell you there are 6 questions. The first 4 prizes are these like little book things about how to do the 5 first Saturdays, as well as the First Friday devotions. There's just nice little pamphlets that have everything kind of broken down for everybody. Makes it really, really nice. So here we are talking about how do we live the Fatima message. This is a great way to help you out. It's published by Mary Our Mother Foundation in Alpharetta, Georgia. I admittedly am not too familiar with that organization, but overall the pamphlets are pretty nice looking. The second place is Fatima's Message for Our Time. It's a little book published by a Monsignor in New York. It's got some very helpful information in it. And the top prize is Father Joaquin Maria Alonso's book, The Secret of Fatima, Fact and Legend. I think this is the second edition or second print of it. So, and it's in very good condition, actually. It's very good condition. The binding is still rather tight. So these are the prizes. So if anybody wants to answer the questions, you can go in the chat room. Now, how you will actually obtain this, if you want to send a message either to me or to Mr. Lofton here through our respective websites, that way we know private messages, we know how to contact you. But if anybody is interested, the first question comes from the first webinar. When the Holy See published the 3rd part of The Secret in the year 2000, what did we say in the first webinar was not provided by Sister Lucia? So again, the first question is, when the Holy See published the 3rd part of The Secret in the year 2000, what did we say in the first webinar was not provided by Sister Lucia? The second question from webinar 2, what did Sister Lucia say of the 3rd part to JP2 in her May 18th, 1982 letter? Again, that's what did Sister Lucia say of the 3rd part of The Secret, that is, to JP2 in her letter of May 18th, 1982. Question 3 is from the 3rd webinar. What did Pope Pius XII refer to in his June 2nd, 1945 allocution that sounded a lot like the 3rd part of The Secret? Again, what did Pope Pius XII refer to in his June 2nd, 1945 allocution that sounded a lot like the 3rd part of The Secret? Feel free to put your answers in the chat room, by the way. Question 4 from the 4th webinar. Pope Benedict XVI said that Vatican II had experienced trivializations that were born from what? Pope Benedict XVI said that Vatican II experienced trivializations that were born from what? Question 5 from the 5th webinar. Pope St. Paul VI specified that the errors flying around in his time were which heresy under other names? Pope St. Paul VI specified that the errors flying around in his time were which heresy under other names? There was a singular heresy that he pointed out. Question 6 from this webinar. What did we say in the 6th webinar that the third part of the secret is all about? What did we say in webinar 6 that the third part of the secret is all about? Feel free to put your answers either in the live chat or the chat below. I will let you know if you got the right answers. Unfortunately, I have some people are blocked on YouTube, so if I don't see you, I don't see you. I'm sorry. I go with the person that did this. And then I will let you know if you won, and I will be happy to communicate with you how to get these particular items. So those are the questions. Feel free to play it back as necessary. And I also want to just tell everybody, thank you all for your prayers. My time in Boston a month ago was in fact very fruitful. I ended up staying an extra week. I was digging very, very much into my brother's electronics and trying to find out more of the mystery of what happened to him. And I uncovered an awful lot, and I'm very, very grateful for everybody's prayers and such. And I know I showed one of the card from his funeral, but now that I've settled most of my brother's belongings, one of the things that I brought with me home here with me is actually a photo. This is my nephew. He passed away in 2017, and that's my brother Dave. So my nephew Damien and my brother Dave. My brother treasured this photo, and now I keep it here in my office. It's been difficult. I'm not going to lie to anybody. It's been a wild 7 months, and thankfully, I think we're kind of getting close to the end now of discovering what happened and all of that. So again, just thank you all very much for your prayers. They've been much appreciated. I'm working on my next project, and it's an article. Right now it's at 10 pages, and it's going to explode some heads. If this gets published, it's going to explode some heads. So stay tuned. There's more to come, and I'll say that this article definitely is, you'll see if it's published in its present form, you're going to see Fatima coming out in a very particular direction. I mentioned earlier how much it affects everything, like what Our Lady told us about. I'm gunning to talk about one area in particular where her warnings do affect us, and it's gonna. I'm giving this to a lot of priests for their insights first and their critiques before I submit this for publication, because this is it's going to explode heads. So. Well, so stay tuned.
There's an answer in the live chat if you want to take a quick look at it.
Released to the public in 1960, JP2 was not sole fulfillment of the vision. Smoke of Satan, atheism, reparations to Immaculate Heart. Unfortunately, I don't think any of those are correct. Those are things we definitely talked about. But I don't believe those are the answers to the questions in specific. I'll double check just to make sure. Very sorry. No. He says brutal. Yeah, I'm from Boston. We're very direct. When I was a teacher in the South, let me tell you, that was always kind of an issue because people are like, I don't know how to read him. He's mean. And I'm like, no, I'm just incredibly direct.
All right. Well, I've enjoyed this, and I really, again, appreciate you coming on and doing this. Y'all send us an email if you have answers. I'll forward them to Kevin. and we'll get back to you on the answers and the prizes. Like I said, you're welcome on anytime. So maybe shoot me a message off the air, and we'll see if we can schedule another show. And everybody, y'all stay tuned for more. I'm sure we'll have some additional videos in the future. Any closing words that you had?
No, I just wanted to thank you all very much. This has been a genuine pleasure. I've enjoyed doing this, and it's helped me to kind of even flesh out my own understanding of some things. And, you know, if you wanted to, you talk about coming on doing a thing again. If this article gets published and PEDs start to explode, if you want to do a show on this, I promise you I'd be very up for it, but just know it's going to be no holds barred. So it's going to be like Kevin Symonds, not unhinged, but gloves are off.
Let's do it.
If you want to see Fatima applied in a practical way, this is it.
I'm up for it. Well, again, thanks for coming on and doing this. And everybody, thank y'all for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We're almost at 15K. Need your support. If you have not subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also hit the like, and I'll also let us know your comments there in the comment section. And as I always say, check us out, patreon.com/reason and theology to support what we're doing here. And you'll also get access to extra content. That's going to do it. Everybody have a good night. Take care. Bye-bye.
If you're looking to buy or sell a home, office, or any kind of property anywhere in the world, you're going to want to call Real Estate for Life, and they're going to connect you with a Catholic agent. Now, that agent will donate a portion of their commission upon sale, and Real Estate for Life will donate 75% of that gift to a pro-life organization at no cost to you. Call Real Estate for Life at 1-877-LIFE-US1 or text them 248-431-1440. If you care about the pro-life cause, call them now.